I have a big job today. I have to run the panel for the next hour and a half. Right, so two lightning talks. The first talk is called Forging Future Defenders, Academia's Role in Shaping Tomorrow's DoD. So I have three very distinguished speakers, the panelists. So first panelist, Chris Donosky from BAE Systems. The second panelist, Colonel Ross Gibb from Texas A&M. Speaker from DoD, Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Kopecki.
Wow.
Please have a seat.
Hey.
All right. So I did something interesting this weekend, which I shouldn't have done. I decided to go through their bios in detail, and it made me really more humble. The amount of work that they've done in their life is stellar. Instead of me going through and then reading their resume, we'll start with them explaining their 2-minute pitch about their life, what the life story in 2 minutes. Maybe we'll start with Lieutenant Colonel Teresa.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for letting me join here on stage, and hello to everyone. So thanks for being here with us as we talk. So Teresa Kopecki, and I actually, interesting, I'm a reservist. I belong to Space Operations Command in the S2, which is our intelligence directorate, and I've been an intelligence officer and a targeteer for coming up on 23 years now. Started in the Air Force and now attached to Space Force. I'm mobilized on behalf of Pentagon S6 Charlie Cyberspace Operations, where we are creating the guidance policy strategy toward the evolving cyber vision of the service as a whole. Where are we going with our full spectrum cyberspace operations in our space domain? How do we use our cyber, electronic warfare, electromagnetic spectrum, and other emissions and systems in order to steer our effects in space and to offer that both to secure and defend all of our mission systems in space for all of our joint partners, but also to understand how to give back effects in space to support combatant commanders as we mature as a service. We just hit 5 years, a 5-year-old service. So already this year we are presenting forces to each of the combatant commands, one in turn, each in turn. And to do so, we need to be able to mature our technologies, the capability of our guardians, of our workforce, and to reach out to research and academia and the emerging workforce that will come into the Space Force in the future as we grow our service. So I'm here. Thank you.
Mine's a little bit more simple because I'm a simple guy. So I'm a retired Army soldier, so I'm still a soldier for life. We helped stand up Army Futures Command in 2018. So I was the first XO to the commanding general when we did that. And honestly, what we're trying to do is accelerate modernization for Department of Defense and the United States government. So I'm the executive director for the George H.W. Bush Combat Development Complex at Texas A&M. We're on the Rellis campus, and what we focus on is integrated autonomy, integrated hypersonics, which includes directed energy. So those are the things that I do. And if you don't, my mom doesn't believe like I'm on actual panel, so can you take a picture and then send it to, I'll give you my information and send it to me. I'm really trying to get my mom fired up that she wanted me to be a doctor, but I told her, I said, hey, if I join the Army, I think I could do some good things. So I really appreciate it. And thank you for the invitation, Lauren. Thank you for sponsoring such an inaugural event, inaugural house. Thank you so much.
Chris. And Ross didn't say howdy, but I'll say howdy.
Howdy.
So like Ross, I'm a retired soldier for life still. Retired out of Fort Hood, Texas. I've been down here in Austin really since 2017. Helped try to bring Army Futures Command and Ross down here with the Chamber. Since then, I've been working for BAE Systems based here in Austin. So 6 years with them, working on our electronic systems, bringing capabilities to the warfighter, and really working with the defense ecosystem here. So part of the things we work here is plugging into the defense innovation, some of these startups and non-traditionals, looking at the technologies and capabilities that we can integrate into our offerings, really to, in our company's motto, protect those who protect us. So bringing a capability for the soldiers, and then really seeing how we foster this this system of innovation and collaboration. So we tie in with Ross at Texas A&M and with the team here at UT. So some of the things we'll talk about today.
Thank you so much for your service. How about we give them a big round of applause to our panelists for the service. Thank you so much. I have a couple of general questions, and then we will open up for the audience questions. I was just first wondering, maybe you can, I don't know who wants to go first, maybe you can give us a couple of examples of academic institutions serving and supporting the needs of Department of Defense challenges, because most of the times the challenge is finding and understanding where the academic support fits into the needs and challenges of DoD. So maybe if you can give an example from your experience, I think that would be great.
I think I'm getting the hook to go first. So when Army Futures Command stood up, we moved a $187 billion portfolio from the Pentagon, Washington, D.C., to Austin, Texas, which is, if you haven't been to, it's just a couple blocks up. It's on 7th and Lavaca is where the headquarters is. So we then created really strategic partnerships with some universities, Texas A&M being one. And what we did was, I was still on the Army side, what they did was lay out, here are your strategic problems, and here's how we can solve it. And what we're going to do is we're going to provide funding from the state legislator, funding from the Board of Regents, if you decide that you want to do research. So that initial seed money for the organization that I work for was about 210 million. Now we're north of 400 million. We're working on the problems, the very hard problems, complex problems that the government's laid out. So there was 14 problems. We said, Texas A&M said, hey, we're really good at 9 of those problems, and then Army Futures Command picked 5. And those 5 were directed energy, hypersonics, materials, how we communicate in degraded environments, and autonomy. So networks and then autonomy. And then the rest of that is history. Now we're at $100 million IDIQ with Army Futures Command. We visited Rice. There was a cooperative agreement that happened with Rice. We visited UT. There was another cooperative agreement. So they're doubling down on the money that they already said that we're good with, and here we are.
Ross, I was just curious on the 14 technology areas. Are these the critical technology areas coming from OSD, or?
So part of it was, right? But what OSD does is collect what the critical technologies are from the services. So the Army had specific ones that are specific to the Army, that are not specific to the Navy or the Air Force. Right. So those were the ones that when we went, again, it's hard for me to flip-flop because I was in the Army with Army Futures Command when we visited Texas A&M initially. And they said, we're really world-class at these 9 things, and they picked the 5. And, 6 years later, here we are. All the facilities are built out. The largest, most instrumented hypersonics ground test range in the United States. All that is in Central Texas. All that is because of the need that Army Futures Command or Department of Defense needed.
Thank you.
And I think one of our relationships, my company was kind of forward-looking. We established a group called our Fast Labs team. They are our tech scouts. They are kind of our R&D for our sector, but they also look at what technologies and what gaps we may have. So while they're looking at that, not only do they look at the startups and non-traditionals here in Austin, but they also had some of our relationships with the academic institutions, trying to see some of these new innovations or new technologies, and how do you operationalize? How do you actually bring those out of the lab to the warfighter? So that is probably our biggest, lesson learned of a good technique of how to actually get and engage with some of these people who are doing some groundbreaking research and innovation and bringing it to great. It's great. It's a capability you can do in a lab, but if you can replicate it and bring it to the warfighter, that's what we need to do.
Do you get involved in maturing these technologies or working with the university? Because one of the biggest challenges is the technology readiness level, increasing the technology readiness level, and that actually is very important. One of the key ingredients is understanding the concept of operations, understanding the bigger issues related to maturing the technologies. Do you get involved? Do you support them by any chance?
It depends on, it's case by case, but that is one of the secrets is they have to know what they're looking for. I mean, they have to understand the application for it. And truthfully, in one of my positions as a former officer, is I'm kind of saying this is how I would use this capability, providing some context, and then with that, then we also work with the engineers and our engineers, but other subject matter experts are saying this is really what we needed to do. So when we develop or bring this technology, it's something that has real world application versus just concepts in the lab.
Thank you. There's
And add to that also because I'm speaking for the voice of the warfighter. So in my own job jar is connecting directly to the warfighter being a warfighter and understanding what technologies they need to break through their limitations on the ops floor. And my own mission space is cyber operations, so that would be our cyber squadrons down at Space Operations Command, the deltas that do the mission deltas that do specific operations for each of the specific mission areas like space domain awareness, and Delta 2, our cyber delta, which is Delta 6, Delta 9 being orbital warfare. Each of the squadrons that are attached to those deltas have unique mission challenges. And so from our perspective, going down small, like from the small up, understanding their unique challenges on console, the connectivity of the mission systems, understanding that each of the squadrons has a different challenge because each of those missions were launched in a different decade under different technology over time to create what we have in space, and with different program management offices as well, different vendors, so not everything talks to each other. So understanding those critical components, and then how do we amplify at headquarters at Pentagon, how do we amplify the voice of the warfighter to make sure that they're heard and a solution can be found. So just contrasting from the small to the large.
No, that's really great insights. I think one of the key topics that we wanted to cover today, especially Texas South, we are in Texas, wanted to see your thoughts, because you bring different perspectives, your thoughts on what Texas as a state can do to encourage R&D, defense-focused R&D, through academic institutions. We have incredible institutions here across Texas. So we just want to get your thoughts on what Texas as a state can, or how Texas as a state can encourage defense-focused R&D through the academic institutions.
Okay.
Again,
There's a reason. So I didn't cover this in the bio, but I was the executive officer to the Secretary of the Army. The Secretary of the Army was the one who selected Austin, Texas. So we worked with a consultant. We had 360 locations. We narrowed it down to 15. And then the secretary said, "Hey, Ross, when we get to 5, you're going to fire up the jet and we're going to go to all those 5 locations." And the idea was we sent a landing team. Landing team would let the leadership know this is what we're looking for, and then we would fly the next day. To not give advantage to the other, if you announced all 5, if you're first in the hopper, you're probably at a disadvantage. If you're last, you're a really good advantage because you have that much time to prepare. So one thing the three things they were looking at, and I'm just going to kind of condense it because there was a lot of criteria, was access to R1 research. So you're in this Texas triangle, right? San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth, College Station, Houston. You had El Paso. You had all these different places. So that was a check. Two was, is there an innovation culture within the place we want to go to, right? Obviously, we landed here. There's a lot of defense innovation, dual use. And then the third was access to capital, right? Are there VCs, are there monies that want to spend on these startups in order to gain momentum in defense innovation? Now, I sat on a panel in Washington, D.C. I'm going to be frank, because we do have some primes here. RTX is here in the house. We got BAE, all good friends, all have brought kit when we were deployed. But a lot of innovation now, they don't come from the big defense primes. They come from startups. They come from university labs and government labs. What those three organizations that I just said are not good at is scaling and integrating. Who's really good at that? Those big defense primes. So I find a great startup, let's say like there's a gear company that has dual use and they could do all these different things, great things, Fluxworks, love them to death. They can't do it all themselves because you can't take a gear to war and say, let's go. You have to integrate it into a system that BAE, RTX, name a defense company that can do. So that's my I wanted to be a little bit shorter than that. It's a little bit longer than that. But it is Lent. So I'm part of what I told my kids, I'm going to be less patient, which they think is impossible. So there it is. So sorry.
But just to go on to Fluxworks, so Ross introduced us, and as part of the SBIR process is having a prime mentor or someone to work with. So we saw Fluxworks with their magnetic gears and said, this is for me, it's like we make electronic systems and sensors, but my platforms and services guys, they make Bradleys, they make M88s, they make Paladins, they make a bunch of stuff. Let me put you in contact with them. And it's been a good mentor-mentee partnership. But that's what you kind of get here is you get the collaboration here in Texas. You get the cooperative group. But part of it is understanding, going back to what is needed is the context. For innovation to happen, I was thinking about this when we talked about the panel, but necessity is the mother of invention. So I go back to when I was deployed in Afghanistan, we were in the mountains in the Hindu Kush. We had our trucks that had our 50 calibers, but we could not elevate high enough to engage the enemy up in the mountains. Well, what happened was my mechanics in the motor pool, well, I can fix that. They increased the length of the neck of the pindle. So now the weapon could actually go from 60 degrees to about 85 degrees and actually engage the enemy because there was a need. So you can't be innovative if you don't know what you're going to innovate for. So providing context is one of the things I think we do as a group here is explain, and Army Futures explain, this is what we're looking for. And that will help generate some of the innovation and say, yeah, I've got something that actually could apply to that.
One of the models that the Space Force has found to be highly successful is that consortium model where we have a super stack of the mentors, big primes and companies that have been doing that business for a long time. As a mentor, small business startups that have bright new ideas that the Space Force needs to understand how to do things maybe a little differently and try out some things. We're open to risk. So, and then also, because so much of our work is so highly technical too, into new sciences and new discoveries of how, let's say, for example, how the spectrum works in environments far, far away. So having academic institutions, getting back to like the heart of the original question is how are the academic institutions pulled into that? That consortium model for the Space Force has been highly successful to bring in undergraduate students, graduate level students, even the faculty as well with research projects. Also nested within our academia are the UARTs. So for UT Austin, it's the Applied Research Labs. We're working with them for some white papers and proposals of some of the far-reaching scientific studies that they've been doing maybe for other services that the Space Force could also modify and adapt for our use as well, so that we can kind of share and understand joint government research. Doing that in a stack with the warfighter involved in that consortium, so we get to the heart of what you were mentioning as well, which is what does the warfighter really need yesterday, today, and we can predict what he'll need tomorrow. And to experiment that in a free kind of form where we're able to explore ideas together, hopefully without boundaries, to be able to think without boundaries, and then try it out, whether it be prototyping to scale to delivery, that would be the goal. But we really love that consortium model. And so for the Space Force, we're actively through our planning toward eventually creating Space Futures Command. That's a big part of its push to have a connection to academia in a network of academic institutions.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you, especially given your background and getting into the defense, running through the process for the last 20, 30 years, now in leadership positions, what is the future skill sets that you think the next generation of workforce that would be required to have before they get in? And what do you think academic institutions and how academic institutions must be thinking differently to support the next generation of Department of Defense?
So I think there's a couple of ways. Some of the things that we've done through our professional military education is we utilize examples of history, of how we learn different innovations. I think we're talking about the innovation topic. You go back to, for me, being an armor officer, how armor transformed the battlefield in World War I, being able to cross the great no man's land that was owned by machine guns. Now you have armor, you're able to move across that. You have other examples of history, like in Normandy with the getting across in the hedgerows, and they basically put forks on their tanks to be able to go through that. How do you translate that and think about that innovation to some of the things you can teach? Again, thinking about this panel, we actually have a friend that's doing a staff ride, taking ROTC cadets to Normandy, talking about some of these challenges. It actually provides context. And again, we're looking for context of what innovation is. You did the historical example. Now you look at current day and what's happening in Ukraine and everything else with the UAVs. Now they may be like, I see how they solved that problem. I have an idea for this problem current day. So that may be a way that you start thinking about how you're solving the problems as opposed to just reacting to what happens to you.
Yeah, so just at Texas A&M University proper, the flagship at College Station, there's 77,000 students, right? It's a lot. 25,000 engineering students. That's a lot. It's the largest school. It's the largest engineering program. And they created a program within the engineering department, for example, that answers to demand of industry. So you could have a bespoke engineering degree based on the needs of industry. That's one. The danger of that is when you're finished with your 4 years, that's not the hottest thing, right? That is the danger. There's also 2,500 cadets in the Corps Cadets, largest Corps Cadets. A lot of people don't realize this. Only 40% will commission to the military. There's 60% left, right? We try to encourage them to still work in national security at our labs, DOE labs, our government labs, our military labs, because AFRL, Air Force Research Lab, Army Research Lab, we have centers that focus on whatever engineering projects, or work with the defense industry. That still contributes to national security, maybe in a slightly different way, right? I have, my two youngest are twins. They went to Texas A&M. So when I got a job there, they were mortified, obviously, because they thought we're going to hang out at Northgate, which only happened a couple times. And they're both lieutenants in the Army, right? One's airborne ranger, jumps out of airplanes. The other one is, is a tanker. He will tell you he's evolved, like whatever. But we want to give them the best that we can, like industry can give them, academia can give them, so they have an unfair advantage for the next war. And hopefully, because we're doing these things, we won't have to fight the next war, because you have to have leverage, right, in order to have negotiation. And if we have the best kit, if we have the best people, then potentially we won't have to fight the next war.
It's complete.
From our perspective, you had asked, what are we looking for in that next generation to train? And the obvious answer is all of our science and technology degrees and aerospace and orbital mechanics and all the things the Space Force needs. But at the root of it all, I would say the true answer is curiosity. So if we can train for all humankind to think toward curiosity and always asking why and how does it work and how does it fit together? How does it fit together with something else? So, for example, if you can train a mind for critical thinking, then they understand how things can fit together and, as you said, also solve a problem, and how those things can solve problems, and how those Lego blocks fit other Lego blocks and suddenly have something that's amplified across maybe multiple mission areas or multiple technologies working together. But before that could work together, you had to have that vision, to have the curiosity to say, why does that work that way and could it work better? And that, at the heart of it, is what the Space Force is looking for. And then unique to maybe not unique, but we all have our government civilian service as well. But for the Space Force, it's about 50% uniformed personnel, 50% government civilian, and then all of our contracted partners and companies that we work with, it's a large part. So the civilian workforce is a large part of the Space Force. And so we're training not only in the uniform, but also out of the uniform to have that curiosity.
Thank you so much. Maybe we'll just open up for audience questions then.
If y'all don't mind sharing microphones. So I'm going to be completely selfish because I got a mic in my hand. Vinod, I would love for you also to tell us about the Defense Advanced Research Unit at Rice University and share some of the great projects and innovative things that y'all are doing as an academic partner with great primes like BAE and RTX and with other academic and defense partners.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for the question. I came to Rice about a year and a half ago. Rice has a specific interest in going deeper and engaging with Department of Defense at this point. For the longest time, as any academic institution, we would always do this transactional relationship, as mentioning to Ross the other day, that as a premier institution, we have the firepower to go and then respond to a solicitation and win based on that merit of that proposal. But that doesn't solve the problem. So I was more fostering the idea that if you understand the history of that particular solicitation, and if you understand the potential future of the solicitation, then you are better positioned as a partner in solving that particular problem versus just as a transactional relationship. So we're trying to morph more into developing these kinds of partnerships across the board. Now, when it comes to Texas, obviously for the size and the scale, there is, as to Ross's early point, 77,000 students at Texas A&M. We don't have the 77. We are like 1/10 of it. But I think as a premier institute, there are significant capabilities that we can offer at the bleeding edge of technology development. For instance, I'll just give you a quick example. We had a recent visit by the ASD from Department of Defense, and the question was, what have you guys done for Department of Defense recently? So my response to that one was, we at Rice was able to build the platform and give the backbone for the entire discipline of nanotechnology. And the probably, I don't know, 10, $20 million or something invested in it has created $500 billion industry, which is the nanotechnology now, not only for the Department of Defense, but for the entire world. So I think there is a role to be played for premier institutes in building new narrative, building new vectors, and building new disciplines right here in Texas. And I think that's where we are going. So that's why we were just focusing on that defense research advancement effort at WISE. Hopefully that answers the question.
Do we have other questions in the audience?
Yes, ma'am.
Say, if not, I can keep going. Did you have one?
Yep.
And if you can share your name and then if you're with an organization.
My name is Gabby. I'm with Gibbs Media, and I was going to ask for educating the public. I think the general public are in positions to be entrepreneurs at varying ages and at an easier rate with entry fees being lower. I think we have yet to talk about the topic of how are you educating the public mass scale without giving up the vulnerability of it being known that you know how to protect yourself from it.
I tell you one thing that we did here before I started working with BAE. We established what we called the Texas Defense Innovation Forum, which was meant to actually explain some of these defense problems. Again, we're not saying here's how you defeat us, but here are some areas of concern, or here are areas that we really want to develop. And the other piece is kind of like this. It's like it's open to everybody. There's not a barrier to entry. There's not a $1,500 fee to go to this thing where everybody in industry can admire each other's new suit. It's actually having good discussions about what is actually needed. So I think that's having that dialogue, having those industry days why Army Futures Command is here, is be able to explain some of the problem sets. And that's why the rest of the DoD innovation centers are here, is to engage and kind of say, I know this is what the solicitation said, and with a little bit of security piece, we'll go into a little more detail of, here are some other details that we did not publish, that's things that you could actually help us with.
I would say that there's a lot of technologies that go into what the military needs. And there's a lot of great companies that have great enabling technologies. They just don't know it. You need those forums that he spoke about. You need a military Sherpa. Joseph is here. He speaks the language. OG is here. He speaks the language. Chris, myself, Teresa, we speak that language that will help a company kind of realize, wow, my technology of communicating is really important. Because if I shoot a slug 1,000 kilometers, that's great. How do I communicate if I hit that target? How do I see that target from that far out? How do I know what we call battle damage assessment and then report back so we can adjust fires if we just didn't get it just right? There's a lot of technologies that I said that went in there, and it's just not the gunpowder and the slug. It's just not the cannon and the angle, right? So what I would recommend is, if you think you have something that's meaningful, go to where you think it might be meaningful, find yourself a Sherpa, have a discussion, and they'll find a good use case. Space Force is so bespoke, right? Typically only Space Force can talk about LEO and MEO and those types of things, satellites. So maybe an armor guy won't be able to talk about it. They barely can talk about anything other than armors, I'll be honest. Yeah, things that go boom. But that's my point, and I do appreciate that, because there are diamonds in the rough everywhere. You just have to know, have that discussion, be open about what you have, and hopefully you find a military Sherpa that says, I know the use case, let me help you with a path. Over.
So I actually have an additional to that. So pulling that thread, for the Space Force, how can you be connected, whether you're a company or a research program or a graduate student class with their professor that's looking to get on a Space Force-based problem? So the answer is walk in the front door. Because we have a couple of things. Literally, our Space Systems Command, Space Force has our Pentagon headquarters, and then we have our field commands for training, for operations, Space Operations Command, and then Space Systems Command is our acquisition pipeline and all of our programs of record. They have SSC front door. So if you even just Google search that, SSC front door, that is the glass door where they want all to come through one portal. Please come and talk to us. So whether you are just a company or even an individual that is interested in knowing what, I have a thing, but I don't know if it's a match, what do you need? That's where it comes. Behind that door are the mission area chairs for each of the mission areas across the Space Force. I work directly with our cyber chair daily. We talk daily about how should we position the Space Force and the technologies we need, what do we need, and talk it through. Also for research projects and other things, all go through that front door. So that's quite literally, you can walk in the door. Now, a physical door you can walk through is the Capitol Factory. So the Space Force, as a piece of the Department of the Air Force, we rely on Air Force Research Labs, AFRL, as our service lab, one lab, two services. So that means that the business award programs through AFWorks and SpaceWorks are funded both through AFRL. So here at the Capitol Factory in town, you can walk through a literal front door, a physical front door, and talk directly to the AFWorks and SpaceWorks leads that are here locally, and they can point you to the different programs they have, whether it's business or research, but I'll say it specifically to students, let's say, who are interested in research projects or how do I get involved, even from my collegiate days on Space Force problems, you can reach out through DIU, so Defense Innovation Unit, also at the Capitol Factory, and AFWorks and SpaceWorks, the three of them. So DIU is for all citizens. They have things that are called fellowship programs, where students can connect directly, either working on national security problems or connect to their study program to some problems. And I'll give you a use case. So for our Space Force headquarters, cyber operations, and the theory of how we should do things in the future, we decided to start a program last semester, and I and my team, we centered around what kind of advanced research can we do with various academic institutions, and we got in partnership with DIU through one of their programs, the National Security Innovation Network inside DIU. It's a lot of acronyms. But anyhow, DIU funds through OSD funding at no cost to the service to do some advanced research with the variety. They do the matchmaking, right university and the right skills to do some innovative research. So last semester for Space Force Cyber was our first semester of research at Texas A&M, Department of Computer Science and Engineering. Perfect. And then this semester we continued that with some more prototyping and some data so we can try it out. And we added a second research project where we started our first experiment with layering universities. So we worked with Purdue University, who's looking at ground infrastructure vulnerabilities for the Space Force, and then brought in Texas A&M to layer in. So now we have double, so that we can look at the CBE and cyber security for those. So next semester in the fall, we want to do more and do multiple universities and maybe do a triple or quadruple stack. And in addition, we're figuring out as a service, did you know that Air Force's cyber has some cyber problems they're getting to as well? And Cyber Command is the combatant command for cyber. They also have a list of mission areas they're trying to get into. So now we're the three, Cybercom, Air Force's cyber, and Space Force's cyber, working together to do academic research at multiple universities and maybe do mini stacks across the U.S. We're trying that out. We're going to try that out in the fall, so step by step.
I love the idea of stacking your university partners. That's super cool, Teresa. We have, I think, our last two questions for this lightning talk. And I want to encourage everyone, we're going to move into our next lightning talk. Again, with Vinod, we have Michelle, and then Chris with Raytheon. They'll be talking about the role of academia and partnerships in our supply chain and challenges that we see on the horizon and how we can mitigate those. So stay tuned, but let's take our final two questions for these phenomenal panelists. And why don't y'all step forward so they can see you? you name an organization if you're representing any.
Sure. I'm Francois. I'm the founder of a communication software company that streamlines communications in a secure way from different sources, whether WhatsApp, email, text, all of those different communication protocols. But the question I have basically involves how we identified that there was an issue that times of crisis has exposed. So 9/11, the pandemic, you notice from the White House top down having issues across the states, kind of really keeping communications across education, different departments in defense, right? And across the government in general. So my question to you, when I realized that there's a lot of collaboration that's happening here on this stage, is there a streamlined way of communications between you guys, or is it jumping around different formats and different protocols, email, text? Is this an issue at all for you? Because we identify this for consumers and for businesses, and we think we have a solution for the government, but we really want to verify if this is even a problem between departments, or let's say in one military group in general.
Thank you. I would say communications as a process is always a challenge. There's so many stovepipes that have to be broken down, and you have to know how to get through those. So there are opportunities across the government. Again, it goes into the whole knowledge management process. I don't know if it's people, pipes, or process, probably a little bit of all. So you may have a solution that enables some of that. But it's something we can kind of pull the thread on, see if there's anything more.
Again, from our perspective, we always want to hear what you've seen as a challenge, what you see as a solution, or a potential way to compare your solutions. And so for myself, I would say, yes, we would love to hear about it. And then that would be through our SSC front door.
Yeah, so what we've seen is that there are different ways to communicate. There's JWICS, which is, your TS. There's SIPR, which is your secret. And when you're deployed, there's another one so your joint community can see it. There's secured text. I mean, there's just so many different ways to communicate in different modes. Everybody has to be on the same sheet of music. And then when you go across agency lines or department lines, it gets even cloudier, right? So you saw that there's a threat to SMS, so people are starting to use Signal, don't use WhatsApp. Like there are so many different methods, but not everybody's on that one specific method, right? So I'll get things on text, I'll get things on Signal, I get things on SIPR, JWICS, and what we call NIPR, which is just your unclassified email. So is there a need? You have to find a champion to help you pull that thread throughout the whole of government, right? Not helpful, but
I think just a quick add to what Ross was just mentioning. I've always found, whether you're working with the defense or you're working with the industry, it's always about people, not between buildings. And I think if you can find the person that Ross is saying, the Sherpa, finding the Sherpa, he can help you navigate through the process. I think that's much more efficient versus you're trying to do everything all by yourself.
Well, and I'll use that as a really wonderful transition to say that's why we're here in person.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the community in Texas, Central Texas especially, is that you can make friends real quick. You just got to go up and ask. So thank you everyone for being here today. Let's give a big round of applause to our participants.